big change reported at Red Bull, with Yuki Tsunoda set to replace Liam Lawson for the Japanese Grand Prix. What does this all mean for Red Bull and the drivers involved? And what does Max Verstappen make of this entire situation? From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks for this, I suppose, special F1 update. And Ian, 2 races down, 22 to go. Coming out of China, there were these discussions of a Red Bull emergency meeting to decide what to do with its driver pairing, how it can catch McLaren, and obviously the big one being, what does it do with Liam Lawson? And based on reports from across the globe, really, from various publications, the growing sense seems to be that Yuki Tsunoda is set to finally get his chance at Red Bull.
It is quite extraordinary, Nick, that
That's a good word.
Reached this situation after just 2 Grand Prix. I don't think anybody in their wildest imagination would dare to have predicted that Liam Lawson would last for just 2 races, Australia and China, the back-to-back doubleheader that we've just had. And he is now effectively out of that car, out of that seat, teammate to Max Verstappen, according to all the reports that we've seen so far and we believe to be true. So what do we know, folks? So we know that in Dubai on Tuesday, which is where Chelem Uvidia, the majority Red Bull owner of Red Bull, has a residence there. A meeting took place. Christian Horner was obviously there, quite naturally, as Red Bull team principal. Undetermined yet as to whether Helmut Marko was there or whether Lauren Mekies was there, the Racing Bulls team principal, to discuss the situation. But by all accounts, yes, as you've rightly pointed out, Nick, Liam Lawson out after 2 Grand Prix. And finally, at long last, after 4 years of waiting in the wings, Yuki Tsunoda appears now finally set to get his Red Bull chance, and no less, for the next race coming up in his home Grand Prix, Suzuka, Japan. Quite the story, it has to be said. Quite the astonishing turn of events, because despite Liam's performances over those 2 Grand Prix, and just for a quick recap, he failed to make it out of any of the 3 qualifying sessions, or any of the first period of those 3 qualifying sessions. It was Australia, the sprint in China, and for the Grand Prix, also at the Shanghai International Circuit, despite crashing in Australia, and quite clearly really struggling with that car, which we know even Max Verstappen has struggled to get on top of, given the RB21's balance issues. Nevertheless, to not give him the opportunity, at least at the next race in Japan, where we know he knows the Suzuka circuit, having previously competed in Super Formula in 2023. He had 2 races that year at that circuit in Super Formula. So at least give him, from my perspective anyway, that one chance to see if racing on a circuit that he knows makes any difference to his performance, bearing in mind he had not set foot or turned a wheel in anger at either Melbourne's Albert Park or the Shanghai International Circuit.
Which is why, obviously, we ran a piece on Racing News 365 where we shared our views on the whole situation regarding Liam. And I said that it feels like he at least deserves the triple header because, as you mentioned, Suzuka, yes, okay, not in an F1 car, but he has previous experience in Super Formula. Bahrain, of course, he only recently tested in preseason testing in the RB21, of course, and the Saudi Arabia circuit. He doesn't know. But, where does this leave Liam? Because, again, it was the worst 2 possible races for him as a Red Bull driver, and there's now even question marks over what's next for him.
We're all speculating at the minute,
yes,
and again, it is yet to be confirmed that he will return to Racing Bulls. However, there is also a degree of speculation out there that Franco Colapinto, yes, folks, Franco Colapinto might just be going to Racing Bulls as a possibility. As I say, it's speculation, it's unconfirmed. We are following it up as best as we possibly can with our sources here at Racing News 365. So there is that slim chance that Franco Colapinto might be in that Racing Bull seat instead, and Liam Lawson could be jettisoned completely. That would be even more harsh on Liam, bearing in mind that at the end of the day, he still did a fairly reasonable job over his 2 stints with the team now known as Racing Bulls. AlphaTauri in 2023, RB, of course, last year. He had 5 races with AlphaTauri in 23 as replacement for Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo sustained that broken finger injury in a practice crash ahead of the Dutch Grand Prix. And then, of course, Liam had 6 races last year after Red Bull decided to terminate the contract of Daniel Ricciardo after the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, over those 11 Grand Prix, Liam had Yuki Tsunoda as his teammate. In races in which they both saw the checkered flag, Yuki finished 6 times ahead of Liam compared to Liam's 4. In qualifying, Yuki was also ahead. A grand total, if you take in the sprint qualifying sessions into account, I believe it was 11-4 in favour of Yuki. So he outqualified him and outraced him in terms of the final checkered flag classification. However, for whatever reason, Christian Horner in particular favoured Liam Lawson over Yuki Tsunoda when it came down to determining at the end of last year who would replace Sergio Perez. That in itself was a major decision for Red Bull, of course, because Sergio Perez had signed a brand new contract at the start of June. So they had to pay him off, costing Red Bull millions, multi-millions to get rid of Checo, and then decide to bring in Liam after just 11 Grand Prix compared to Yuki Tsunoda's 4 years Grand Prix worth of experience. But the belief was that there was more potential in Liam compared to what they saw in Yuki. And the belief was that he had the better temperament as well to sit alongside Max as his teammate compared to Yuki. So now here we go, just 2 Grand Prix, and all that decision making has really cast doubt on Red Bull's management team, and in particular Christian Horner, because it was he who decided that he wanted to give Checo that additional contract, and it was he who decided to promote Liam Lawson over Yuki Tsunoda. Quite a bit of a red-faced moment for Christian, it has to be said, looking at this situation in its entirety. And let's just draw on this for a second. I mentioned Franco Colapinto just a few minutes ago. If Red Bull decides to put Liam back in that Racing Bulls, how is it going to look if Liam then outqualifies Yuki in the Red Bull? Because the belief is that maybe that Racing Bulls car is actually better than the Red Bull. Certainly we know, as I mentioned earlier, that Red Bull is proving quite a handful, even for Max. And despite what Max has done with it, he's managed to drag that car to a certain level of performance and get good results out of it, that at this stage means he's sitting second in the driver's standings, just 8 points behind Lando Norris. Liam Lawson, of course, 0 points from any of the 3 races that we've seen so far, if you also take into account the sprint race. But yes, wow, quite a turn of events. And as I say, how would it reflect on Red Bull if Liam is quicker in a Racing Bulls compared to Yuki in that Red Bull? That would be astonishing turn of events as well, just to add to what we've had so far.
And actually, to be honest, I don't think that would come as a massive surprise, given what you said. That there's been so many reports that the Racing Bulls is potentially a better car than the RB21, but more importantly, a better car to handle for the driver. It's easier to control. We've seen, even for Max, just how much of a handful the RB21 is, and it's quite clear Max has been working wonders in his car to somehow be second in the Drivers' Championship. But it almost, in a way, given that Liam has lasted 2 races, it almost shows that perhaps Sergio Perez was maybe better than we all gave him credit for, given that he lasted 4 seasons in that team with obviously what was also some very difficult cars all set up to suit Max Verstappen. But on the topic of Verstappen, what's fascinating is that there are also some reports coming out that he in particular is not happy about this driver change.
Yeah, it's coming from the Dutch newspaper De Telegraaf, and we know De Telegraaf has really good inside sources. Mind, that is the main Dutch national newspaper, and it focuses solely on Red Bull, and of course focuses solely on Max Verstappen. So we have to believe that what we're reading in that paper, both online and in print, is the true to what they're writing, that Max is not happy. And it wouldn't surprise me. And if Max is not happy with this situation, does that again draw into all this speculation as to what might happen with Max and where he might go in the future? He said post Chinese Grand Prix that he's quite happy, quite relatively relaxed with the situation. He doesn't take too much store in what's going on. Well, now, if we're to believe what's written in the Telegraph, that situation has changed for him, of course, and because we were led to believe that Max was actually going to be involved in this meeting as well to discuss who his potential teammate might be and to determine, should we keep faith with Liam just that little bit longer, or would you want to see Yuki alongside him? Well, that's obviously been taken out of his hands, it would appear. And to say this meeting took place in Dubai with Christian, Chulumuridia, and whoever else might have been there from Red Bull management. But for Max, this might just be another one of those situations where he's thinking, I really want to be with this team. It's a bit chaotic at the moment. That's a word that's been used by a couple of people, Ralf Schumacher being one, I believe. I think David Coulthard might have even mentioned as well that it's a little bit of a chaos going on inside Red Bull at the minute, which is understandable, because to make this decision after 2 Grand Prix, as I said at the top of the show, is quite extraordinary.
Unheard
I
of.
can't recall something like this. Giving a driver just 2 races and then saying, you're out, mate, off you go.
Yeah.
Certainly not in modern day F1.
No.
Maybe it took place way back in the day, but certainly in the past 2-3 decades, I don't recall something like that.
And just finally, what's remarkable is seeing the fans react to all of this on social media, and the fact that the driver, who a lot of the fans believe is probably deserves to be the angriest in this entire situation, is Daniel Ricciardo, because of course he was replaced by Liam with 6 races to go last season, and we know that Daniel's goal, his big dream, was this fairy tale return to Red Bull to kind of end his career. The fact that Liam's lasted 2 races, it seems that the fans at least believe that Daniel should feel pretty angry about what's gone on.
I think actually Daniel's probably going to feel quite relaxed about the whole situation. I mean, Daniel, as I did over the many years that he was in Formula One, in fairness, yeah, probably reflect and think what might have been. But the bottom line is, he will know. Racing Bulls knew, or RB as it was last year, VCAR, whatever you want to call it. Red
Which
Bull
name?
knew. Yeah. And Red Bull knew that
Yeah.
he had his opportunity last year. He knew going into last season that was his big chance. He knew he had his eyes on that Red Bull seat prize coming for this year. That was his target. He knew if he performed well, that was going to be his opportunity to get back to Red Bull, because that's where he wanted to be. Bottom line is, didn't perform over those many Grand Prix. Was it 18? Yeah,
Yeah.
it would have been 18 because Liam Lawson did the last 6. So Daniel had 18 races to prove himself, and he didn't quite live up to the billing that even he had set for himself of how much he wanted to do well and how much he wanted to be back at Red Bull. So, yeah, hindsight's a beautiful thing. We all know 2020 vision, etc. And if things had been different, if he had
Yeah.
have performed to a certain level, then more than likely he would have been in that Red Bull seat this year. But he didn't perform to the level that not only Red Bull and Racing Bulls RB wanted of him, but probably he knows deep down that he didn't perform to the level that he knew he was capable of as well. I reflected on it all over last year, back end of last season when it happened, but it was the way it was all handled
Yeah.
was the biggest thing for me that let down Daniel Ricciardo, because he deserved better than that exit, because he'd been such a great servant to Formula One. But bottom line is, didn't perform. So whatever he might be thinking now, it was on him that he's not in that Red Bull seat this season.
I would also love to know the thoughts of Sergio Perez right now. I wonder if he's thinking, I told you so, but I guess we'll never know. Another one. No.
Didn't perform. 49 points over 18 Grand Prix last season, the last 18. It cost the team its defense of the Constructors' title, because there were only 62 points adrift of McLaren at the end of the day, which means if Checo Perez had scored just 63 points more, and that's not a lot when you think about it, over the course of 18 Grand Prix, and however many sprints there were as well, and you tot up those of those 18 Grand Prix, probably 4 maybe, perhaps, 63 points shy of winning that third consecutive constructors title. That was on Checo Perez. And obviously, yes, the fact that he couldn't get the most out of that difficult to handle car, as we know, because even Max only won 2 out of the last 14 Grand Prix over
Unheard of as well.
Start that he had. Yeah, but he won 7 out of 10, 7 out of the first 10, and then it was 2 out of the last 14. It was a difficult car. We know that. But Checo Perez, his time had run its course quite clearly.
Will Yuki Tsunoda do better? Let us know in the comment section below what you think and what you think is going to be next for Liam Lawson. Ian, amazing as always. And to the viewers, be sure to keep an eye on Racing News 365 in what feels like a very fast developing situation. From Racing News 365, Ian and I will see you later. Bye, guys.
Thank you for watching. Take care, folks.